Secretary of State Ed Miliband.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With permission, I would like to make a statement about the local power plan and the AR7 solar and onshore wind auction results, both of which are published today. Britain's drive for clean energy is about helping to answer the call for a different kind of economy that works for the many, not just the wealthy and powerful in our society. And in the last few weeks, our Warm Homes Plan has delivered the biggest public investment in upgrading homes in British history to cut bills for millions and tackle fuel poverty. We've secured the largest offshore wind auction in European history with, for the first time, a clean industry bonus to drive investment into our industrial communities. And we've agreed a Fair Work Charter with business and trade unions as a first step to improve workers' rights in renewables. Today I can report to the House the results of the AR7 auction for onshore wind and solar. In onshore wind, we secured 1.3 gigawatts of power at the price of £72 per megawatt hour. And in solar, nearly 5 gigawatts at the price of £65 per megawatt hour. I can inform the House, together this onshore wind and solar will provide enough power for the equivalent of over 3 million homes, further reducing our dependence on international fossil fuel markets. It represents the largest solar and onshore wind auction in UK history. Now, I've had representations, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we should have cancelled this auction and instead just build new gas. I can tell the House that the price of this onshore wind and solar is less than half the price to build and operate new gas stations. Indeed, onshore wind and solar are by far the cheapest power sources available to build and operate. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have rejected those representations. Instead, we have record-breaking results that will cut fat bills for families across Britain. But as we get off the roller coaster of fossil fuel markets, controlled by petrostates and dictators, we don't want this clean energy to be simply owned by big companies and multinationals. We want every community in this country to have the chance to own our energy future. And we know that community ownership is a transformative tool to build the wealth and pride of local areas and give people a stake in the places in which they live. We already see this in pioneering community energy projects across Britain, and I pay tribute to them. Lawrence Weston in Bristol, where England's tallest onshore wind turbine, and I visited, is 100% community owned and generates tens of thousands of pounds a year to reinvest in the local community. The Geraint Thomas Velodrome in Newport, which hosts nearly 2,000 solar panels, one of the largest rooftop solar projects in Wales, cutting their bills dramatically. And the Huntley Development Trust in Aberdeenshire, where community wind projects generate income that helps fund local charities. And we know that community energy doesn't just spread wealth and power, but also contributes to the resilience of our energy system by generating and storing power closer to where people live. Yet, Madam Deputy Speaker, despite the individual success stories, Britain has never decisively seized the opportunities of community energy. Around half of wind capacity in Denmark is owned by its citizens, as is almost half of solar in Germany. Yet in Britain, currently less than 1% of our renewables are community owned. With our local power plan today, we will change this. Today we announced the biggest public investment in community-owned energy in British history. During the last Parliament, less than £60 million was spent on government community energy schemes. Today we set aside up to £1 billion of funding from Great British Energy to invest. This will offer grants to local authorities and community groups to support projects in their early stages, loans and project finance to support construction and operation, and funding to help communities buy a stake in larger renewable projects in their areas. And this funding will also be targeted at underserved areas of the country where it can make the biggest difference. Great British Energy estimates this funding will support an initial 1,000 community and local energy projects. But this is just the start. Today we send out the message to community groups, sports clubs, miners' welfares, village halls across the country, in every community of Britain. We want to give you the chance to own your own energy, to transfer money from the pockets of energy companies to your community, and to generate income for the benefit of local people for decades to come. A Labour government enabling every community of our country to own and build wealth for local people. But to make it happen, we know it is not just about providing capital funding. Communities need help to plan and develop their projects. So alongside this funding, Great British Energy will establish a one-stop shop to provide support and advice about local and community energy, with a team of expert advisors to help communities get their projects off the ground. Britain's publicly owned energy company working hand in hand with our brilliant mayors, local authorities and community groups to turn the ambition of local communities into reality. Now, alongside the funding and support, We also know that we must confront the reality that for years the rules of our energy system have held back the growth of community energy. Local and community schemes face hurdles that may be straightforward for large developers to overcome, but are too high for voluntary groups with limited time and resources. We are determined to break down these barriers. So we will also work with Ofgem to reform market codes and supply licences to help communities sell the power they generate. And we will ensure community energy projects benefit from our reforms to planning and grid. We also, Madam Deputy Speaker, want to make it easier for communities to take a stake in larger projects through shared ownership. Building on examples like the Isle of Skye Cooperative in the Hebrides, which owns a share of a local onshore wind farm and has generated over £1.5 million for the local community. We think there is huge potential for many more projects like this. So we will consult on how we could use existing powers in the 2015 Infrastructure Act to mandate an offer of shared ownership. Powers passed more than a decade ago, but never implemented. It would mean that when big projects are built by companies, local people and communities will be offered a stake in them. As my honourable friend, the member for the Western Isles, has said, we need to move from a situation where communities can only aspire to be passive beneficiaries of projects owned by large companies to being owners themselves with benefits in perpetuity. From community benefit to community share and community stake. Taken together, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is the most comprehensive package of support to grow local and community energy our country has ever seen. It builds on the Pride in Place programme, the community right to buy, and our world-leading commitment to double the size of the cooperative sector. And we know the local power plan will not be delivered from Whitehall, but place by place, community by community. So today I issue an invitation to local and community groups. Come forward with proposals and we will support you to make them happen. A stake for the British people in our energy system, generating returns for local communities and local people. Power, wealth and opportunity in the hands of the many, not the few. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for prior sight of his statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is becoming increasingly difficult to tell whether the Secretary of State is at the dispatch box as the Energy Secretary or rehearsing for a future move to perhaps number 11. Once again, the Secretary of State is distracted by personal ambition than the bleak reality families are facing across the country with crippling energy bills. Today's announcement is being sold as a bold shift of power to local communities. But cutting through the fluff, this plan does not make electricity cheaper, and it does not offer value for the taxpayer. This plan does nothing to reduce wholesale prices, nothing to fix the grid connection backlog, nothing to tackle the structural costs. Instead, the government are asking taxpayers to fund small-scale projects that will optimistically provide minor reductions in costs for a few local buildings, whilst leaving families and businesses across this country still paying higher prices. There are no guarantees that the £1 billion committed through the Great British Energy Scheme will deliver lower bills. No clear test of value for money, and no convincing explanation of why subsidising small piecemeal projects offers a better return for taxpayers than backing affordable, large-scale nuclear generation that would genuinely move the dial. Spread thinly across the country over several years and funnelled through yet another Whitehall-controlled body, this is not a serious intervention. It is a press release masquerading as an energy strategy. Madam Deputy Speaker, alongside the local power plan, the results of allocation round 7 this morning raise serious questions that the Secretary of State has yet to answer. In the government's own press release, they rely on internal analysis to claim that additional solar and onshore wind procured through AR7 could lower bills in the early 2030s. But that analysis has not been published. It looks only at a narrow scenario, excludes wider system costs and does not give a full picture of future bill levels. So if ministers are so confident in their figures, why won't they release the full impact assessment? What exactly is the Secretary of State hiding? AR7 also underlines the direction of travel under this government. Longer contracts, higher strike prices and greater risk locked in for bill payers. The extension of contracts for difference from 15 to 20 years means households will be tied into paying these costs for even longer, regardless of whether circumstances change. At the same time, the government has relaxed planning requirements so some offshore wind projects can bid before planning consent has even been secured. All of this points to the root problem. Electricity prices are already too high, and the policies being pursued by this government are only pushing them higher. Doubling down on carbon taxes and loading more expensive wind and solar onto a system that is not ready risks driving up costs for both households and industry, making British business less competitive and leaving families to pick up the bill. Families are being asked to pay more, not less. Labour promised to cut energy bills by £300. Instead, bills have risen by £190 since they came into power. That is the reality behind their rhetoric, and that is the reality that every family up and down the land understands as they open their energy bills. And at the centre of all of this sits Great British Energy, an £8 billion taxpayer-funded quango that was meant to lower bills for everyone. So far, all we have is the promise of a highly paid chief executive, a new board and more bureaucracy. Why do we need another expensive state body to do what the market and existing institutions should already be delivering? And that is the fundamental difference in approach. Our cheap power plan focuses on bringing down the underlying cost of electricity, saving the public sector and everyone else vastly more in the process, and doing so without costing taxpayers a penny. This government is more focused on its own internal politics than on delivering the one thing people need: energy that is reliable, abundant and, above all, affordable for all of our constituents.
Secretary of State.
Well, there weren't any questions, but I will. I'll reply nonetheless. Let me start on the issue of the AR7 auction, because I think this is very interesting, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it will give the House a picture of what's actually changed. And what's changed is the Conservative Party, not the reality. Because we had the AR5 auction a couple of years ago when the Conservatives were in power. And in the AR5 auction, the price of solar was higher than it was in this auction. And the then Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Lady who's now the Shadow Secretary of State, said this: "Our reliance on gas for electricity production today risks making power prices higher than they would be in a system with a greater share of generation from wind and solar. Moving to home-based clean power mitigates risks to bill payers now and in the future." Now, what has changed? Well, what's changed is that the Conservative Party have gone full MAGA. Let us just be honest about this. They've decided to chase reform into a ludicrous position, doubling down on fossil fuels, rejecting even solar and onshore wind, the cheapest, cleanest form of power you can possibly have. And I guess the Honourable Gentleman is just reading out the script. Now then, on community energy, well, I mean, I have to say, I congratulate him, because he's given a brilliant example and picture of why the last government was so hopeless on community energy. I mean, he obviously thinks it's a terrible idea. So, I mean, you know, he's very welcome to do this, but he's sending a message to every Member of Parliament and all of their constituents. The Conservative Party, they're against community energy projects. They're against the things that will cut bills for local community groups, to every sports club, to every community centre, to every library that will benefit from this funding. There's a very clear answer. The Conservative Party says no. You don't deserve it. We don't want you to have those lower bills. We don't want you to have that cheap clean power. We don't want you to have that income and resources to reinvest in our local community. If they want that as the dividing line, Madam Deputy Speaker, bring it on, I say. This government is on the side of local communities, on the side of cutting bills, on the side of reinvesting money into those communities. The Conservative Party, in their new incarnation, is against it.
Chair of the Select Committee, Bill Esterson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, Select Committees look at the evidence, and the evidence we've heard is that community energy is a great way of bringing down bills and giving people the confidence to take part in the energy transition. In fact, talking of solar, which the Secretary of State mentioned in his statement, we heard that golf courses use 10 times as much land as solar farms do now. And even if the Committee on Climate Change recommendations are adopted, it will still be twice as much land use for golf courses. The Country Land and Business Association told us concerns about land use are a myth, that the planning system protects the best and most versatile land for crop production, and that the rollout of solar should be encouraged as a way of diversifying for farmers, delivering cheap electricity for both neighbouring businesses and domestic users as well. So will the Secretary of State say how he intends to ensure as many people as possible in rural areas understand the benefits of community energy and solar more widely, and will he ensure that those myths are finally busted?
Secretary of State.
Well, I think my honourable friend did a very good job of busting those myths in his question, and I think he's absolutely right about this. Look, the truth is that you can't at one and the same time complain about bills being too high and then reject the cheapest, cleanest form of power. But I'm afraid that is the position of the party opposite. There's no hiding the fact. I mean, nobody can disagree. You can disagree about other things, but nobody can disagree that solar is the cheapest form of power, but they're against it. On his point about community energy, I think he makes a really important point. And let's be honest, Madam Deputy Speaker, on this. We are in the foothills of what we need to achieve as a country on this. Because when you look at Germany, when you look at Denmark, they are miles ahead of us. And this is about a different conception of energy and who owns it. Not just big multinational companies, not just the big companies that they seem to want to just leave it all to. We want local people to be able to have a stake in the system, and that's what this plan is about.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Pippa Heylings.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Liberal Democrats welcome the government recognising what communities across the country have been saying for years, that community energy is one of the most powerful ways to cut bills, rebuild trust in the energy system, rebuild local resilience, take people with us on the journey to net zero. We campaigned hard to see community energy written into the Great British Energy Act alongside many people, although not everybody it seems to be today, in this House and the other House, alongside community groups like the South Cambridgeshire Climate and Nature Group and other community organisations across the country. We believe in localism, in empowerment and in giving communities a real stake and ownership in our clean energy future. And I thank the Minister for working with us to make sure that we did get this into the Great British Energy Act. Because as we rightly move away from volatile fossil fuel costs controlled by foreign powers, we must ensure that our new clean energy system puts community first. And it must mean giving people the power to generate, own and crucially sell their own clean energy locally, with profits reinvested in the places where the energy is produced. So, while we welcome the local power plan in principle, the devil is in the details. One, what happened to the government's pledge of £3.3 billion for community-owned energy, and today what we're hearing about is £1 billion of investment. We don't want to follow the Conservative government's retreat from ambition on local clean power. It's not the time to scale back ambition. Secondly, on the crucial issue of empowerment, local empowerment, regulation is needed, and organisations like Power for People constantly, regularly told us that there are barriers to access, as the Secretary of State said, to fair local markets. They've welcomed this plan too, echoing the promise made by the Minister here that the government will establish local energy supply models. The local power plan, I've looked through it very quickly, in the final place talks about the regulatory changes necessary, but when will those come through? This has to happen, the energy transition, not to communities but with them.
Order. Secretary of State.
I thank the Honourable Lady, and I say this genuinely, for her advocacy on this issue ever since we came into government and indeed before, and she's a powerful advocate for community energy. And indeed I congratulate the group in South Cambridgeshire as well as she did. On the, let me deal with a couple of points she made. On the point about the level of investment, I think in anyone's view, this is a very significant scale of investment we're making. I said it's £1 billion compared to 60 million in the last Parliament under the last government. So this is a massive scaling up, and I think it's a realistic assessment of what can be spent over this Parliament. But obviously, this is the start of our ambitions. On her point about working, I think a point she was making was about working with local community groups. I think this is very, very important. And I think she will know that one of the challenges that local groups face is getting to the stage of having a project that's ready to go. And I think part of this is about working with those groups to make sure that can happen. And on the point about Ofgem and some of the regulatory changes, absolutely, we're going to work as quickly as we can to unblock some of the barriers and make sure that this can happen as swiftly as possible.
Mike Reader.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, Northampton is one of the towns across the UK that will benefit from the local power plan. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that my schools, college, universities, the 4 hospitals in my constituency and my sports clubs, including the Cobblers, one of the greenest football clubs in the country, will benefit from this plan, and we will see the wealth generated from local power kept in our community?
Yeah. Secretary of State.
Congratulations to the Cobblers, Madam Deputy Speaker, and indeed all of the organisations in my honourable friend's constituency. He's absolutely right. We think there are huge benefits across the country, and indeed GBE have now, I think, are opening their website so that different groups can register an interest and work with them.
Roger Gale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. National Grid is one of the large national private companies run by the wealthy and powerful in society that the Secretary of State derided in his statement. National Grid is seeking to build on the edge of an area of scientific interest and a nature reserve a 90-foot high converter station covering the size of 5 football pitches. Local people that the Secretary of State claims to champion don't want this. So will the Secretary of State champion the local people and consign this project to the dustbin of history where it belongs?
Well, the honourable gentleman will know that there's a planning process for all projects. I do gently point this out to him, though, not necessarily specifically on his project, because I want to make a more general point, that if we are going to get the benefits of cheap, clean power, we need to build the transmission infrastructure. And the biggest threat to the countryside is the climate crisis. That is the single biggest threat to biodiversity and to nature. So I'm sure he feels strongly about this specific issue he talked about, and so do his constituents. But I do believe it's right to build the transmission infrastructure we need to lower bills for people and tackle the climate crisis.
Rachel Hopkins.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for his announcement of the £1 billion funding for community energy projects under Labour's local power plan. Could he outline the benefits of community energy for constituencies like mine of Luton South and South Bedfordshire, and how local communities can get involved and ensure any profits are reinvested locally?
State.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question. I think there are sort of, just briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are sort of 3 really important aspects to this. One, communities can have lower bills for their community centres and their local institutions. 2, they can generate a stream of income by selling power back to their grid. And thirdly, there's something wider and perhaps more intangible, which is giving local communities a sense of a stake in the system. And I think this is really, really important. Because I think one of the ways in which we gain consent from people is the sense that it isn't simply the big multinationals that are going to own our energy system, it's local people themselves.
Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the publication of the local power plan, and I honestly recognise the government's commitment to community energy. But I think there is still a piece missing, namely that properties in the vicinity of a community energy generator can directly benefit, ultimately be directly supplied, rather than through a third party. Will the Secretary of State look again at how community energy is defined and include as households benefiting from the energy generated within that community? That we have been sort of struggling with that definition of community energy in the Select Committee. And I think this is important, that households can benefit from energy generated within the community. Thank you.
State.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her advocacy on this issue. My honourable friend, the Minister, who is the world's expert on these questions, assures me, or at least the UK expert on these issues, I won't push it too far, he assures me that the Honourable Lady's important question about the statutory definition, and I think it's code P441, are being answered in the plan.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his announcement. Community energy is incredibly powerful in rural Britain as well, particularly in the village of Humsoft, where Humsoft Net Zero set up the community-owned solar farm. So can I just restate my invitation to the Secretary of State to join me on a visit to Humsoft Community Solar Farm, and thank him once again for the statement.
Secretary of State.
Well, I will take him up on this kind offer, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I think he will see powerfully one of the examples of community energy in practice. And I think what's so exciting about today's announcement is we can now reproduce this right across the country.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Does the Secretary of State agree that the Mandelson scandal illustrates the reputational risk and damage that can be done by ignoring aspects of criminal exploitation? Does he know whether there is a difference in the cost of solar panels that are imported from China compared with other possible sources, and what sort of safeguards does the government have that we are not encouraging people to put on their roofs the products of criminal activity and forced labour exploitation?
Secretary of State.
Well, he and I have had exchanges on this before, and this is a serious issue, and he's absolutely right, within his rights to raise it. I'd say two things to him. One, that Great British Energy, after the GBE bill, has pledged to be a leader in this area and has appointed an advisor to work on these issues. And secondly, he will know that as part of the solar roadmap, the industry committed something called the Sustainable Stewardship Initiative, which is precisely about having independent monitoring of where solar panels came from. I do take this issue really seriously. I take his advocacy on this issue very seriously. And look, it's work in progress, but it is really, really important that we get it right.
Olivia Blake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Shadow Minister would do well to remember the measly £60 million that was spent in the last government on community projects, and the fact that they were opposed to GB Energy. And today's plan sets out clearly the £1 billion for community projects coming through GB Energy. Community energy can deliver cheaper power, local jobs, and importantly, public support for clean energy and net zero. Can the Secretary of State set out how Great British Energy will be removing barriers to community ownership so communities can directly share in the benefits of net zero?
Secretary of State.
Well, I think my honourable friend speaks with great eloquence on these issues, and one of the things I became very interested in is this power that was passed in the 2015 Energy Act around giving local community groups the sort of right to buy a share of large-scale projects. That power has never been triggered. I think it may have been the fruits of the coalition negotiations. But we are very interested in making that power a reality. That's just one of the ways in which we can break down the barriers that my honourable friend talks about.
Sir Julian Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State be aware that small businesses across the UK are really struggling with energy costs, and particularly in rural areas and communities like North Yorkshire. What role will this plan play, or what can small businesses get from this plan to lower their costs as quickly as possible?
Secretary of State.
Well, look, this plan is mainly about community groups and non-profit organisations, but I think the honourable gentleman raises a serious issue, and it is something that we're talking to the National Wealth Fund and others about, because it emphasises this point, which is there is sort of low-hanging fruit here. There are ways in which, if we can make it possible for small businesses and others to make these investments, they can lower their bills, and we might as well use these free resources, the free resources of the sun that are available, and obviously the solar panel cost has come down a long way. So it's something for me to take away and to work on.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm really excited by this announcement today because I'm the chair of trustees of Semi Montague Youth Club in my constituency. We have a roof that would benefit enormously from solar panels that may generate income and make us more sustainable going forward at a time when local government funding is drying up. In addition, we have 13 acres of land, and I've always thought that we had the potential for ground source heating and if we could actually get some money to invest in that we can actually provide energy to some of the buildings that are around us as well. So I wonder if my right honourable friend agrees with me that when we delve into this issue, actually the scope is boundless. There's many projects that we could look into.
The two ideas that my honourable friend has sound absolutely ideal for this fund. I mustn't sort of put my thumb on the scale too much on the eventual outcome, but they sound ideal to me, and I think he is right about this. You know, in a sense, I think what we're starting here is something that over time will grow bigger and bigger. And in a way, it's partly about raising our eyes and thinking, well, if it works in Germany and Denmark, why shouldn't it work here? And why shouldn't local people get the benefits of this? And I think that is why it is a big transformative shift, actually, in the thinking about what's possible.
Graham Ledbetter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The SNP have been very committed to community energy projects for a long period of time. Indeed, we've invested more than was invested by the previous government in community energy projects, over £67 million in nearly 1,000 projects. So, a very much welcome, belated welcome to the party when it comes to renewable energy. But when you're talking about community energy, are you including community heat projects, which can be combined with community energy projects? You can have a turbine with a community heat network, for example, and that can drive a huge amount of benefit to the local community.
State.
Well, yes is the answer to that question, Madam Deputy Speaker. It absolutely includes all kinds of innovative projects. And I think one of the things that we're going to find as we open these funds for bidding, both from local authorities and community groups, is the innovative, imaginative potential ideas from local people about how they can drive this forward. And I suspect we're going to be overwhelmed with the sense of the imagination and innovation that we see, and that's what's so exciting about it.
Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's quite clear that communities that host energy projects should in some way benefit from them, and I really welcome those principles being incorporated into this plan. And I particularly welcome the government's support for rooftop solar for Sefton Community Hospital in South West Norfolk, not just from an environmental point of view, but as a way of reducing energy costs for public services and having that saving reinvested back into the front line. Will my honourable friend commit to tracking the financial benefit for these proposals so that we know the true benefit for communities up and down the country?
I think my honourable friend makes a really important point, and as a sort of super nerd, I'm very interested in these kind of analyses of the impacts, and sometimes governments do things and then you don't track the impacts and you can't sort of prove the difference it's made. So he makes a really important point, and his point about Sefton Hospital also is really important. What GBE is already doing with their work on schools and hospitals is making a difference to public services up and down the country.
Ben Objective.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In his statement, the Secretary of State said, a stake for the British people in our energy system, generating returns for local communities and local people. And he went on to say that he was on the side of local communities. Now, I appreciate he's talking about Auction Round 7 and not about nationally significant infrastructure projects, but in my constituency, we have the East Park Energy Solar Farm, and at 1,900 acres, it's having a huge impact on local communities, a huge impact on both Great Staunton and Hale Weston in my constituency, and residents there are massively opposed to this. So what would he say to my constituents who feel that he very much isn't on the side of local communities, given the decision for this project falls squarely with the Secretary of State?
I won't get into the details of a planning decision, but what I will say to him is local people that host, or local areas that host energy infrastructure should see community benefits. But what I'd say to his constituents and others, there should always be community benefits, but what I would say to his constituents and others is that if we want to bring bills down, if we want energy security, we've got to build the energy infrastructure we need. And solar is really a really important part of it, because it is the cheapest, cleanest form of power. And I'm sure some of his constituents won't like it, but sometimes we have to stand up and say we think this is the right thing to do for cheap, clean power.
Catherine Fuchs.
Thank you. And I thank the Secretary of State for his statement today announcing big investment in local energy. He mentioned the fantastic example of the Geraint Thomas velodrome in Newport, my neighbouring constituency, with its 2,000 solar panels. And this absolutely shows the value of those community energy projects which will cut bills and tackle climate change and literally give power to those local people on bikes going around the velodrome. I'm delighted that Welsh Government and UK Government both have an exciting vision for community energy, and that Welsh Government created Uni Cymru in 2023. So what can the Secretary of State tell me about the further local energy plans and investment in Wales and in my constituency of Monmouthshire? Secretary of State.
Well, look, one of the things I want to do is congratulate the Welsh Government on their initiatives in this area, because they are really, really important, and they are great leaders in this. I was whispering to my honourable friend whether he and I should be cycling in the Geraint Thomas velodrome, but he thought that was probably a bad idea. On balance, Madam Deputy Speaker seems to agree from the look on her face. I'd say to my honourable friend, I really hope that her constituents benefit from this. They will be able to see with the velodrome the potential benefit that there could be for them, and we look forward to working with the Welsh Government so we can supercharge the benefits from this plan.
Tom Morrison.
Mr. Speaker, too often my constituents, like many in the north of England, have seen such government schemes ploughing money disproportionately into the south of England. In fact, government figures show total investment per jobs is about £13,000 in London compared to £9,000 in the north west. So how will the Secretary of State ensure such regional inequalities are not reinforced where projects are funded?
As a South Yorkshire MP, I completely agree with him on these questions. And look, he makes a really, really important point. He's put it on the record, and I'm sure GB Energy will be very conscious of this, which is to make sure that there is a fair balance across the country when it comes to the allocation of these resources.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Secretary of State for explaining very clearly how the local power plan represents the biggest investment in community energy ever, helping to create jobs, develop skills and generate growth. This ambition is shared very clearly by the redevelopment of New Stanton Park in my constituency. It's creating thousands of jobs and apprenticeships and returning industry to Ilkeston. Will the Secretary of State then outline how the local power plan, alongside Mayor Claire Ward's Mayoral Renewable Fund, will support developments like New Stanton Park by lowering energy costs, attracting investment and expanding gold standard apprenticeships?
Well said.
Another really exciting part of this plan, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is working with local mayors like the excellent Claire Ward, because there's just a real chance here for kind of mayoral vision to combine with national government vision to combine with local people's vision about how they can transform their community and generate resources. So I'm very happy to endorse the sentiments of my honourable friend, and I really look forward to working with him and Claire on this plan.
Anne Davies.
Community energy has an important part to role in Wales, where it currently powers around 17,500 homes, and many of those are in my constituency in Caerfyrddin, where Ynys Sir Gar are leading the way. So I welcome the local power plan and its funding envelope of £1 billion, so that we can rapidly expand this number. So can the Secretary of State tell me more on how this funding will be fairly distributed across the UK, and will he introduce a ring fence to ensure that Wales and other devolved nations such as Scotland and Northern Ireland receive at minimum their population share?
Well, the Honourable Lady asked a really important question, and one of the things that we'll be doing is working with the Welsh publicly owned energy company to make sure that we together make sure that Wales benefits from this plan. I made the point to the Honourable Gentleman who asked me the question about a fair balance of funding across the country. I think this is very, very important. I also say this, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, I think we will find that this programme is going to be highly oversubscribed, will be my prediction, because there is such appetite, and I hear it in the House, for this plan and for the potential of this plan. But one of the things we'll be definitely doing is working with the Welsh Government.
Alice MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the local power plan, which builds on much clean energy investment in Norfolk, including backing for the Vanguard wind project and £17 million for warm homes in Norwich. I'd urge the government to keep backing the East of England as a hub for clean energy. Could he maybe outline a bit more detail about how constituents will become aware of this project, particularly maybe people who won't hear their statements today or perhaps hear this on the radio, to make sure that those communities that would actually benefit the most are able to maximise this funding?
Well, I think my honourable friend makes a really, really important point, and I think this is where local members of Parliament have a massive role to play in approaching their local community groups and others who they think can have potential to benefit from this, because one of the most important things about members of Parliament is they have, and I say this across all sides of the House, is that so many of them have a sense of the groups in their constituency, the areas in their constituency that can really benefit from this. So I would encourage all members, and we will make sure, my honourable friend the Minister and I, we will make sure that we provide the resources for MPs across the House to be able to kind of not only know about the plan, but draw it to the attention of people and community groups in their constituency so they can benefit from it.
James.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. My Lib Dem colleagues and I have long campaigned for community energy, but it's not enough to have a plan to deliver local power projects in the future when there are already projects around the country ready to go now, but sadly have not been supported by the National Grid. In Wokingham, the Barkham solar farm is ready to go, but the National Grid is not ready yet to hook it up to the grid. They have delayed it for far too long, and recently they've come up with another long delay. So what is the Minister doing to fix this failure and get the Barkham solar farm hooked up to the grid to the benefit of our local community?
I do think the Honourable Gentleman makes a really, really important point. One of the things that we've done is done a big overhaul of the grid connections queue, which is, as he knows, was the sort of Wild West, really, a sort of chaotic first come, first served queuing system, and NISA have done a big reordering of the queue. But one of the things that we've got to do is put pressure on the transmission operators to make sure they actually deliver. So I would encourage him to write to my honourable friend the Minister about the specific project, and we will take it up with the National Grid.
John Whitby.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've spoken to groups across my constituency such as Transition Crich and Derbyshire Dales Community Energy, who are working to create new community energy owned energy projects in order to cut bills and drive down emissions, and the 1 billion announced today will significantly help with their aims. However, these groups will grow faster if they're able to sell their energy directly to households in their communities. So could the Minister therefore please update us on what plans he has to implement local supply rights for community energy schemes?
We're right into the nerdery here, and it's really important nerdery, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend makes such an essential point about the ability for this power to be sold back into the grid. I would assure him this is something that we are working on with Ofgem to improve the offer to local community groups, because this is an essential part of ensuring that economic value goes to the groups, including in his constituency.
Paul Wall.
Speaker, in Rochdale, we're the birthplace of the cooperative movement, so we all know what happens when local people come together to take back control when there's been a clear market failure. And that's one of the many reasons I'm proud to be the Labour and Cooperative Party MP for Rochdale. The Secretary of State talked rightly about this shift from community benefit, which is crumbs from the table for the big energy companies, to community ownership, and how that can sustainably lower bills for community groups and community buildings. Does he agree with me that today's local power plan is all about power to the people, not just in sense of clean energy, but in sense of power to communities to determine their own bills and their own future?
Power to the people, indeed, great slogan, Madam Deputy Speaker. And look, I really share the sentiments of my honourable friend, both about the cooperative movement and indeed Rochdale's pioneering place in the cooperative movement, which is so important in our country, but also the shift in thinking that this plan represents, this shift in thinking about ownership, that it always has to be done by the big multinational companies, privately owned, to a different way of thinking about this, which is, yes, they're going to continue to play a role, but why shouldn't local people be able to come together and own their own energy? That whole principle was founded in Rochdale, and this plan will, I hope, help the doubling of the cooperative movement that this government is committed to.
Jonathan Davis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State for his statement, the publication of the local power plan and the £1 billion investment which is going to support community groups provide green and sustainable energy and help their financial sustainability as well. We've got considerable expertise in Derbyshire when it comes to using water to create power. In fact, the mills that were built on the Derwent Valley over 200 years ago were amongst the first to harness that opportunity, and now we have a number of hydro projects on that stretch of water. So can I encourage him to come to Derbyshire to see some of those projects, to look to see where we could add more, and if he wants some help from local people who have expertise in this space, I'm more than happy to put him in touch.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to doing that, and I thank my honourable friend for his invitation. And I think he actually makes a really important point that we can actually look back at our history, as my honourable friend from Rochdale also made this point, and actually draw inspiration from some of the pioneers who had a vision which is not the same vision as today, but had some of the similar principles. So I congratulate the people in his constituency who are working on these issues, and I look forward to meeting them.
I thank the Secretary of State for his statement this afternoon.